Hello, everyone. Welcome back for some more Let's Read Higurashi. We're on Chapter 4 of Chapter 4. Those aren't good numbers, and seems like they know who we are, and we got some information from the informant, so let's hope things are fine, right? I had a restless night's sleep. I did nothing but turn over repeatedly during a night that seemed like it lasted for eternity. Even then, I eventually fell asleep at some point, not realizing how high in the sky the sun had risen. I shook off the urge to go back to sleep. It was then I noticed that the phone was ringing. The time was almost 10:30 in the morning. It was clearly too late for a wake-up
赤
call.
坂さんですか？おはようございます。大石です。
Oh, we couldn't tell.
うん、うん、うん、うん。
Waking up to the sound of Oishi's voice was a little too much of a shock. My delicate ears were ringing. But thanks to that shock, I was suddenly wide awake.
ああ、どうも。おはようございます。
ひょっとして今お目覚めですか？
Yeah, man.
出張中とはいえ勤務時間には起きないといけませんよ。
まったくです。
Yeah, says the guy who went out drinking last night, but all
以
right.
後、気をつけます。
あなたの眠気をもう一つ覚ましてあげられるかもしれない話があります。ひなみ沢駐在所から届いた遺失物に興味深いものが混じっていたんです。
Okay.
遺失物。
詳しい話はこちらにいらっしゃってからにしましょう。
That's concerning.
お昼前に来れますか？
いえ、すぐに伺います。
Oishi already knew what my mission was, since Oishi said it was something that would wake me up. It was hard to believe that it would be irrelevant to me. Honestly speaking, judging by the information from Sato-san yesterday, knowing that my cover was already blown, I couldn't wander to and from Hinamizawa carelessly. In other words, my investigation was at an impasse. If there was some information that could put me back on the trail, there would be nothing. That would be nothing less than a stroke of good fortune. After vigorously washing my face, I pulled on my jacket and hailed a taxi, heading towards the Okonomiya police station.
おお、来た来た。天才ジャンシ様の到着だ。
I'd rather you not call me that here. We're on the job, buddy.
遅くなって申し訳ありません。で、一体何が出たんですか？
With absolutely no intention of reminiscing about last night's Mahjong game, I need to clear my throat. I pressed him to get to the point. Oishi, anticipating that I would act that way, cut to the chase without any resistance.
先ほども申し上げましたが、今朝ひなみ沢の駐在所から遺失物が届きました。
When I think about a police box lost and found, all I think about is Animal Crossing on the GameCube. God, take me back. Take me back. Lost items that were turned over to the police box were sent to Okonomiya Station after the paperwork was filled out. Oichi pulled out a plastic bag from a drawer and laid its labeled contents on the desk.
財布ですか？
I hope it's not mine.
でしょうな。中には小銭はあってもお札はなかったもんなんで、スリが中身を抜いた後に捨ててったのかななんて思ったんですがね、最初は。
Uh-huh. I didn't understand how this wallet, so far removed from Tokyo, could possibly be related to the kidnapping. If it had drawn Oishi's attention, it would have to be something dramatic, like if the wallet belonged to the missing grandchild. That would be absurd. Like something that convenient would happen. If that was it, then there were probably initials written on the wallet. Like the initials of Toshiki Inukai, the minister's grandson, T.I. Thinking like that, at this point, I didn't suppose that this wallet was something that could get Oishi so excited. Oishi, after putting on a pair of disposable plastic gloves, handed me a pair of the same. I didn't feel this wallet was such an important thing, so I had my doubts about whether there was any point in putting on gloves. However, I didn't want Oishi's intentions to go to waste, so I put them on. Oishi opened up the plastic bag and pulled it out, showing me the back. As I had imagined, there were initials engraved there. But it was... oh no. It was slightly more detailed than I had thought, with Toshiki I marked on it. Oishi grinned at me with a look on his face that said, "See? Well, we can't confirm from that this belongs to the minister's grandson," I informed him calmly. This wallet was irrelevant. It was nothing more than Oishi's over-eagerness. First of all, there was absolutely no way in this distant locale that the missing grandson's wallet would be found with such convenient timing. After all, the Onikafuchi Guardians wasn't related to this case in the first place, so there was no way this wallet belonged to the grandson. I wanted to decide this was the case. Even I didn't really know. Even though what should have been a top-secret case was leaked before I'd even been dispatched. In this situation, how can I say this was definitely unrelated? Would it be more prudent to pay more attention to this wallet? It had only been a couple of days since I arrived in Hinamizawa. In those couple of days, due to a number of remarkable events, my nerves might have just become just a little frayed. Shaking my head slightly, I cleared it of unnecessary thoughts. Oishi opened the wallet's zipper, revealing the contents. Okay, so is it like a Japanese style one, like a little pocket zipper one? When I think wallets, I think folding. Inside was small change and a number of crumpled receipts. Oishi, from that jumble, pulled out a folded card. Seeing that, my heart stopped for a moment. It was a card from a dental examination. The name Toshiki Inukai, and the age. A perfect match. The dentist's location was in Tokyo. There was no need to explain any further. How far was it from Tokyo to Hinamizawa? It was far enough that taking the bullet trains and cars would still take several hours. Why would a wallet with a dental examination card from Tokyo show up inside Hinamizawa? Could it belong to a tourist who came from Tokyo? Or maybe a villager on vacation to Tokyo just happened to pay a visit to the dentist? No. It had to have fallen into somebody's bag by accident. In my mind, I desperately struggled to find a possible excuse as to why this wallet didn't belong to Toshiki Inukai. It was as if it just wouldn't do it. It just wouldn't do for this wallet to belong to him. However, weeding out any possibility for error one by one, the haze surrounding the wallet in front of me faded, gradually letting it come into clear focus.
Ne?
Not much you can say about that, huh? I felt a shiver of electricity run up my spine. My pulse quickened and a thin film of sweat began to coat my entire body. From Oishi's point of view, I was probably slack-jawed and spaced out with a slovenly look on my
この
face.
鹿には問い合わせましたか？
そりゃ赤坂さんの仕事でしょ。私はまだそこまでは。
この財布はいつ頃のものでしょうね。
拾ったのは村人です。昨日のことだそうで。
Yesterday. Okay.
じゃなくて、この財布はいつ頃落ちたものでしょうね。
ここいらに雨があったのはちょうど先週7日前。
Okay.
中身が水にやられた様子はないから、
Okay.
最長で
Okay.
6日前からでしょうね。
この財布の存在は署内で誰が知ってます？
初期対応の日並沢駐在所の警官、それから遺失物対応で係が 2,3 人、あとは私とあなた。内緒の事件と関係があったらまずいでしょ。ベラベラとは喋ってないつもりですよ。
電話を借りていいですか？
どうぞどうぞ。外線は0発信から。
I dialed the phone number inscribed on the examination card. I could hear my pulse pounding inside my head. Could there possibly be something so absurd? The addresses on the receipts and cards inside the wallet were all from around the area where the grandson lived. Boy, this evidence just keeps piling up, huh? The name on the examination card was also a match. The time we deduced that the wallet had been left behind also matched up with the timeline of the kidnapping. Of course, it was possible I could just laugh it off as a big pile of coincidences. There wasn't any strong evidence. Rather than all this circumstantial proof, the contents of the phone call I was about to make would have a much greater meaning.
はい、お待たせしました。中川歯科です。
どうも。こちらは沖宮署です。実は、お財布の落とし物がありまして、所有者の連絡先を探しております。ご協力をいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。お財布の中に、そちら様の診察カードが入っておりまして。ええ。氏名は、犬飼俊樹くんです。
It's a good strategy.
カードの番号を申し上げますので、電話番号をお調べいただいてもよろしいでしょう
It's
か。
a real good strategy.
ありがとうございます。
Because it's not just directly asking for information which wouldn't be allowed. One, we're the police, but then two, we're doing something that's totally
お願
believable.
いできますか。
Still holding a receiver, I pulled out a notebook from my breast pocket with my free hand. I went up to the page with the grandson's address and phone number recorded on it.
どうもすみません。はい。お願いします。
I compared the phone number written in the notebook to the one being read out on the other end of the line. During that process, I spun around to look behind me uneasily. I locked eyes with Oishi. Oishi looked puzzled, wondering what the matter was. Oishi's behind us, you say. That's interesting. Just making a note of that with this sound effect. Why would I feel uneasy and look behind me? That was because the person on the other end of the line was reading out the numbers as though doing so straight from my notebook. It seemed that HQ was in quite an uproar thanks to my report. No matter how many times the authenticity of the evidence I had linked to the grandson was called into question, I could only respond that it was the truth. When the lead investigator first picked up the phone, I was grilled about the evidence I'd found was almost too good to be true, if I do say so myself. But after having doubt after doubt dispelled, he fell into silence. The receiver was finally handed over to the section chief. When he picked it up, the background trum on the other end of the line disappeared, and I knew it had gone completely silent. After asking the same questions about the wallet that the lead investigator did, the chief quietly spoke his next words.
わかりました。
Whoa,
こちらから何人か増援を送ります。
okay.
今日の夕方には到着できるでしょう。赤坂君は引き続き現地調査をお願いします。財布が発見された地域の情報を収集しててください。加納さんは何人か選んで現地へ直接。
Yo, this song's crazy. Yo, it's got like that crazy drum and bass going on. The fact that he was sending Kano, the lead investigator here, meant that the chief had decided there was a possibility the Onikafuchi Guardians were somehow implicit in the kidnapping. However, it felt as though until the lead investigator, whom he trusted, had this song's crazy, had verified the evidence with his own eyes, he was still going to be skeptical about it.
どうでした？
本庁から増援が出発するそうです。私は現地調査を命じられました。財布の落ちていた場所はどこなんです？
高津戸のあたりだそうです。
I don't know where that is.
ここが沖宮。ずーっと行って、ここがひなみ沢。
Okay.
で、さらに上流にぐーっと上がっていくと、この辺が高津戸です。
Have we been here? Oishi, this song is craziness. Oishi explained where the wallet was found by pointing to the locations on the map on the wall. The place called Takatsudo was even more remote than Hinamizawa was. Yo, we got shit in Hinamizawa?
高津戸界隈はほとんど民家なんかありません。
Never heard of this place, I don't think.
昔の廃村です。
Well, that would explain it.
無人の家屋が点在する、な
Damn.
んとも寂しいあたりですね。
大石さん、高津戸へ案内してもらうことはできますか？
構いませんよ。赤坂さんお一人ではなかなか自由にひなみ沢に出入りはできないでしょうからね。無論、また野球帽とマスクをしてもらうことになりますが。
That Oishi had agreed to accompany me was very reassuring. If Sato-san's information was to be believed, my cover had been blown. I wasn't sure if the villagers had realized the fresh meat dispatched from public safety was a tourist that had visited the village yesterday. In other words, me. But deciding that they hadn't noticed would have been overly optimistic. Even a cursory thought, Takatsudo, where the wallet was found, couldn't be ruled out as a hiding spot for the kidnappers. The Takatsudo area didn't have any residential buildings, nor was it alongside a highway. There wasn't any reason for even the locals to go out of their way to visit it. It was exactly what you would call a long-forgotten ghost town at the end of the road. You couldn't ask for a better place to hold a kidnapped grandson. Also, you couldn't get to Takatsuta without passing through Hinamizawa first. Those several conditions made the area all the more important. I couldn't brush it off any longer. There was no longer any doubt that the Onigafuchi Guardians, or somebody who hired by them, were involved in the kidnapping. If that was the case, then the fact that this wall was found might have already been leaked to them. They might even know so much as how the Public Safety Division was operating. The case of the wall couldn't be something they didn't know. In that case, there was a possibility the enemy was lying in wait. To dive alone into enemy territory, surrounded by enemy territory, to say the least, required an amount of courage. Nay, recklessness that I just did not have.
大石さんの同行がなければ、そうおいそれと踏み込めない村でしたので、ご協力いただけて本当に助かりました。正直なところ、またお金を要求されるのではと思ってましたよ。
それは正直を言えば、ひなみ沢なんか好き好んできたがないですからね。運賃でも弾んでもらいたい気分ですが、でも一緒にタコを囲んだ友人の頼みとあれば断るわけにはいきませんしね。
That's a bit close. Oishi grinned as he pounded me on the back. That's a phrasing. It struck me that he didn't just want to jump ship rather than having any sense of duty towards his job. Even so, that didn't really matter. Right now, I really appreciated the gesture.
早速出してもらえますか。
If the enemy knew that the police had obtained the wallet, then they probably would have moved the hostage to a different place. There wasn't a moment to lose. But Oishi, without regard to the fact that we were about to head out, began to remove his jacket.
何を知ってるんですか。
まあ用心ですよ。家中の栗を拾うなら相応の用意が必要と思いましてね。
Oh my god, is he getting strapped?
あなたも来ます。
Gun? Oh, what Oishi pulled from the drawer below the desk was a stab-proof vest. Okay, that's not gun. But it would help if there was gun. His name was Toshiki Inukai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction, Inukai. There was only one reason for him being here. You didn't include gym or art class, his grades were above average. This was the result of having private tutoring lessons twice a week. If you omitted the fact that he still couldn't do pull-ups, there wasn't much else that would make him hate school. Of course, he understood full well that his grandfather was a cabinet minister. But he also knew that not too many people were interested in their relationship. He didn't like to go out of his way to bring up his grandfather or call him the Minister of Construction. And finally, he at least tried to know a little more about what kind of work the Minister of Construction did than your average Joe. What that entailed was that when you tried your best to make life better for the masses, sometimes you made a few enemies. He knew that all too well from the time he'd spent as a class representative. His grandfather had many enemies. He knew that he might personally catch some of that fallout, so he had to be twice as cautious. He was taught that by his parents. That's why, the moment he was kidnapped, he instantly knew that this was one of those occasions. He understood that he wasn't being treated as Toshiki Inukai the person, but rather as Toshiki Inukai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction. That he wasn't personally at fault, but this was the result of some unavoidable trouble with his grandfather's work. It made little difference, but when he realized it wasn't because of anything he did, he was able to relax, if only a little. Of course, at first, he was struck with a terror befitting his age, wondering what was going to happen to him. But after a while, being tied up and only able to stay lying down, began to ponder a great many things. First, he thought about the reason he was being abducted like this. He understood the answer to that easily. He was taken hostage to coerce his grandfather, the minister. There was no doubt about that. He didn't know exactly what the Minister of Construction did, but it was easy to imagine that there was much to be gained from threatening him. He respected his grandfather more than most. He earnestly believed that his grandfather was within the top 20 of the most important people in Japan. That was exactly why he couldn't forgive anybody who tried to threaten his beloved grandfather. More importantly, he wouldn't forgive anybody who would use him as a tool to threaten his grandfather. His grandfather was really busy and rarely had time to meet with relatives. That's why, with what little time he did manage to scrape together, he just dropped by unannounced. And as an apology for not being able to meet during New Year's or summer vacation, he doted on his grandson very, very much. The number of times that Toshiki was looked upon with disregard just because his grandfather was a politician and a minister certainly weren't few. But he never thought even once that he wanted his grandfather to quit being a politician. Because it was his beloved grandfather, he wanted to continue his career as long as possible from the bottom of his heart. I'll be honest, like this is hitting me. Well, it's not hitting me hard, but it's definitely I'm connecting quite a bit with this. Um, as like a kind of tell-all sort of thing, I have in my family a super infamous politician. Like I'm talking a laughing stock for the country level politician. There was famous people making jokes about him on comedy networks level, absolute buffoon of a politician. If you know anything about the province of Alberta, you probably know who I'm talking about. And like, I'm just thinking about how, like, yeah, no, he's in my family, and how there's a relation there that, you know, how that kind of came down on that part of the family. He's not, I've never met him, because by the time I was cognizant of the world, he was already out and possibly dead. But it's like just thinking about what happened with like how his, children kind of came about from that. It's just an interesting connection I'm making here. Yeah. No. Um, it's weird. Like the fact that I give history lessons and have to bring up someone that is related to me because it was that big of a deal of a politician. If you know, you know. Anyways. However, Toshiki was now being held hostage, and his grandfather was being threatened. His grandfather, who called him the apple of his eye, was silently or surely suffering. He might do anything to save his grandson, maybe even putting aside his ideology if it was required to save his grandson. He might cave into the culprit's demands if it meant saving his grandson. When Toshiki thought about that, an inexplicable anger welled up within him. In his current situation, he was unable to forgive the cowards who would make his beloved grandfather suffer by using such dastardly means. That feeling swelled up inside of him, displacing the fear. What he thought of first was something any boy would imagine. Oh, let me guess, breaking out and killing everyone in the room? Yeah, exactly. Oh my god. Okay, like, for real. I think if there's any girls watching, I want you to know that I feel like almost all men at all times think about this in every situation. Like this is a general thought that we always have. If something goes wrong, I'm always imagining like a how do I get out of this situation and save people sort of thing. This is absolutely a a gender thing. Like absolutely. Get out of these bonds, beat up the bad guys, then hand them over to the police. Hell yeah. Well, I'm always thinking about that. Images of all the brave heroes from all the manga he read had passed through the back of his mind. In his imaginary scenario, he slipped his bonds easily, floating like a butterfly to evade his captors, then stinging like a bee to bring them all down. In the end, it was nothing more than his silly little fantasy. But with his vision obstructed, unable to see anything, it was something you could get into more than any anime at the moment. It's almost like reading a visual novel. In actuality, he was enjoying these little scenarios in his head for the long period of time he was tied up. His captors hadn't really done anything to him that they would feel sorry for. However, eventually he began to grow tired of his fantasies and more realistic scenarios began to run through his head. It was then he realized none of them were a solution. Yes, he wanted to do something for his grandfather who was being threatened, that he was being held here to inflict pain on his grandfather was a thing that he could least forgive, and also the most vexing. And then he noticed there was a much simpler way he could save his grandfather without having to beat up his despicable captors. That was to remove himself as a hostage from the hands of these villains. If he was to disappear from here— what do you mean by disappear, kid? That makes me worried. His captors would have nothing to threaten his grandfather with. The captors had restrained him, but they hadn't treated him roughly, and they made sure he was fed well enough, meaning at most he was nothing more than the means for their threat. They weren't looking to bully or kill him out of spite. If he behaved, no ill would befall him. Realizing that gave him a strong sense of courage, and carrying his train of thought this far, he let it run its course to its natural conclusion. Right now, at this moment, Toshiki Inukai had decided to escape. His ears had been stuffed with sponge-like material, acting as makeshift earplugs. However, they didn't actually do much to block out any sound, and he could overhear everything his captors were saying. Realizing this was to his advantage, even when his captors spoke to him, he acted like he couldn't hear them due to the earplugs. His captors, thinking he couldn't hear their conversations, talk about all sorts of things without any reservations. Thanks to that, he was able to obtain various pieces of information. First off, this wasn't Tokyo. It seemed that this was quite a distance away, and on top of that, in the countryside, nestled deep in the mountains. It also seemed that his captors were inconvenienced living out here, so he could deduce this place was far removed from any sort of town. Finally, whenever they went out to buy food or supplies, they would always take a car. That fact caused him some dismay because he knew that the method he learned at school of running around blindly while shouting for help wouldn't work here. What is that method he's talking about? He paused his little mental escape scenario there. His ultimate goal was to find somebody who would help him. If somebody fit that description wasn't close by, his chances of escaping successfully grew slim. A desolate, far-off land deep in the mountains, a place where you couldn't go shopping without a car. In this situation, escaping would be very difficult. He grew depressed, and after a little while he returned to his original scenario. Imagining becoming a hero like in the manga he read, and beating down his captors became his respite. However, as he played those delusions out in his head, his heart, hating to surrender, continued to search for a way to escape. And then, he thought of a way. If the goal was far away, then all he had to do was get closer. His goal in a nutshell was to find somebody who would help him. In other words, somebody other than his captors. If he faked being sick, then his captors would have to take him to the hospital or bring a doctor to him. He'd probably be reluctant to do that, but he already knew that the hostage was more important than anything. In the off chance something happened, like him dying occurred, they wouldn't be able to threaten anybody anymore. Luckily, he had experience that would help him fake a serious illness. At the end of last year, he was inadvertently involved in a car accident and had to undergo surgery. Okay. That's something I'm going to keep in the back of my mind. For some reason, my brain is saying this is important. The scar from that surgery was still— haha, Tonoshiki, haha, that's the joke you expected. The scar from the surgery was still clearly visible on his lower torso. He recalled the pain and suffering from that time. The existence of that experience would make a huge impact on the realism of his performance. He was quite confident in his ability to fake an illness. His captors at first took that as a sign that he needed to use the washroom. Untying only his arms, they tried to bring him there while he was still blindfolded. But he didn't try to get up. His hands now free only clutched at his abdomen as he writhed in agony.
おい、どうしたんだ？腹でも痛いのか？
He still had his earplugs in, so he pretended he didn't hear his captors asking the question. He was about to nod, so he hurriedly had to stop himself.
どったんね。小僧が腹を押さえてるよ。腹痛かな。
His captors looked down on his suffering form for a bit. One of them proposed a course of action, while another had laid his doubts that Toshiki might be faking
どっ
it.
たんね。坊主。腹痛むんかい？そいつ耳を塞いでるから聞こえてないぜ。
参ったんな。腹痛に効く薬なんかあらんね。薬局行って買ってくるか。
腹痛って言ったっていろんな薬があるだろう。症状がわからないうちはいい加減な薬は買えないぜ。
How conscientious.
腹押さえてるし。便秘やん。
Oh, big poopies.
便秘薬でも買ってくれば収まるやんね。
When in doubt, shit it out.
間違って飲んでも死なんしな。
Yeah.
決めつけるなよ。盲腸とかかもしれないだろ
Oh god, I've had that. Oh, not
う。
fun.
俺のおじさんがさ、
Yeah.
昔急になったことあってよ。あれはかなりビビったぜ。
Not fun. One of the captors leaned over beside the boy, who was bent over in
か
agony.
わいそうにな。あ、全身汗だらけじゃないかよ。腹か？痛むのか？おいおい、痛むんならあんまり抑え込んじゃかえって悪いぞ。
Realizing his captors were concerned about his stomach, he inadvertently let his shirt right up, letting the scar from his surgery come into plain view. His vision was still obscured with packing tape, so he couldn't see their reaction to his scar. But his captors were taken aback, and judging from their momentary silence, he obtained the reaction he was looking
お
for.
い、やばいぜ。この手術跡はそんなに昔のものじゃないぜ。
その小僧、熱出てるんかいね。体温計あるん？
あるわけねえよ。でもすごい汗だぜ。おでこは結構熱いと思う。緊張状態が続くとさ、昔の傷なんかに応えたりするって聞いたことあるぜ。
These guys are educated too, holy crap.
じゃあどうすんよ。薬じゃ治らんちゅんてんか？
何の手術跡か知らねえけど、とにかくまずいだろう。下手すると命に関わるぜ。
まずいんて。これ本当にまずいんて。
医者に見せた方がいい。このままじゃ突然ぽっくりいっちまう可能性だってあるだろう。
Toshiki Inakai, with those few words, knew that the situation was progressing exactly as he had envisioned it, and snickering to himself on the inside, pressed his act even further. He didn't even need to see what his captors were, didn't need to see to know that his captors were panicking or running around like chickens with their heads cut off at this troublesome turn of
診
events.
療所連れて行くか。
そりゃまずん。先生を連れてくる方がいいね。
入江の先生か？
I was going to say, there's only one doctor that they would bring into this story.
いいのか？大丈夫か？
人質に何かあったらまずんね。しゃあない。緊急事態やん。
One of the captors hurriedly left in the car. Another of the men, completely shaken up at this point, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. It looked like they were bringing a doctor. As long as the doctor wasn't an accomplice, that doctor was his goal. He was someone he should seek help from. His captors were probably wary of that happening. They were prepared for it. This would all come down to luck. Some of the sweat emerging from his brow was that of nervousness. At that moment, the packing tape covering his eyes and ears was torn off. Such an interesting little room, too. The light coming in makes it so ethereal. The burning light that he was seeing for the first time in several days hurt his eyes. After that, the gag that made it hard for him to breathe was also removed.
大丈夫か小僧。今お医者を連れてくるからな。しばらく我慢してろな。
The doctor was coming. The doctor was coming. Now, how was he going to ask for help? And how was he going to get away from his captors? A plethora of thoughts began swirling through his
分
mind.
かってると思うが、お医者に余計なことは言うなよ。俺たちも別にお前に乱暴がしたいわけじゃないんだ。そりゃ分かってるよな。
Toshiki Inukai nodded while feigning pain and obedience. His expectations, and the enemy's expectations. Whether they doubted he was faking his illness or not, they knew what his goal was and would try to stop it. His stomach contracted from the stress of this gambit, making it seem like his stomach really was starting to hurt. No, it really was. There was no reason to panic. If he failed with his approach to the doctor, there was nothing to lose. If there was something to lose, it was this method of faking illness to get in touch with the doctor. If he could think of other methods from here on out, it wasn't much. At the present, this was the easiest, most drastic way he could think of. Oh, the more he thought about it, the more it looked like this was his first and last gambit. Eventually, he heard the sound of a car approaching once again. The sound of a car's door being hurriedly open and shut. The sound of several footsteps approaching. a young man in a white medical coat. As he acknowledged the boy, a suspicious look showed itself on his face.
彼は村の子じゃありませんね。
Oh my god, it's a small town, so of course you'd know them all. The captors didn't respond. From the looks of it, the young doctor realized that this was an abnormal situation. One of the captors talked threateningly.
先生には関係のないことです。
For a while, the doctor and the captors silently glared at one another. However, unable to stand the sight of the boy continuing to suffer, the doctor, as the captors had hoped, didn't press any further.
その古い手術跡というのが何の手術でしたか？
そりゃわからないです。
本当は診療所に連れ帰るべきなんですがね。
先生、そりゃさすがにちょっと。
The doctor said he wanted to bring the boy back to the clinic, but the captors silently shook their heads at the notion. It was a fleeting hope, but it was only natural that the captors would refuse. At that moment, his eyes met with the doctor's. Seeing that the boy's painful state was abnormal, the doctor suspected it was a serious illness.
大丈夫ですか？私は医者です。この手術跡はいつ頃のものですか？
去年の冬に事故で。
事故？そうですか。参ったな。
He couldn't let the doctor figure out he was faking it here. He had to do something. He had to figure out his some way to keep this going and tell the doctor he was being confined and needed help.
患部を少し触りますよ。痛むところがあったら言ってくださいね。
I swear to God, if he starts like finger motioning Japanese characters to talk to him. Seeing that it was extremely painful, the doctor crossed his arms and began to ponder. He had to somehow get himself to a hospital. To Toshiki Inukai, faking this illness was the performance of a lifetime. I am so freaking enthralled. Like, holy crap, this is such an interesting, different chapter. It's so different. I love it. I need to sip my tea. Like, it's...
皆さんもご苦労さんなことです。
Like, right now, it's there's twofold stories going on, and they're both... well, three, if you count the family stuff with, you know, the Sonozakis, but it's legitimately just so enthralling.
お暑いでしょうが、せいぜい頑張ってくださいよ。
Are we doing a raid right
不
now?
法投棄のダンプが現れたらすぐにご連絡ください。
Oh, no, this is us going through, right?
急行いたしますのでね。
ご協力
Yeah,
感謝
this
し
is
ま
us
すよ
going through
大石
the,
さん
through the point.
どうぞ
A gap wide enough for a single car was opened up in the barricade. Oishi, showing his gratitude, or perhaps a threatening attitude, with a short beep on the horn, rolled the car forward through the checkpoint. This time my appearance was the very embodiment of the word suspicious. A baseball cap, mask, and sunglasses. On top of that, even though it was sweltering, I was wearing a hoodie. Any respectable police officer would be loath to not stop me for questioning. I had meant to be overcautious, knowing full well that my face was known, but it might have already been too late for that to have any use. Using that as an excuse, I doffed that unbearably hot hoodie and windbreaker, ripped off the mask and hat, and threw them in the seat behind me. Real question, why wouldn't we just hide in the trunk? You know? Why wouldn't we just hide in the trunk? As someone who... Now listen, this is going to sound crazy. As someone who has at one point had to hide in a trunk. Now this sounds crazy, but you don't know what sometimes you have to do, okay? As someone who's had to curl up and hide in a trunk for an extended period of time, it's not that bad. You just have to worry about bonking your head. But it's not that bad. You know? While you sneak through somewhere. Listen, I have led quite the life. And 9 times out of 10, these are not my decisions to make.
ありゃいいんですか？
こんな小細工したところでどうせ割れているでしょうから。
そりゃまあそうでしょうな。
Oishi, probably thinking that my unexpected behavior was funny, continued to laugh. The beautiful and pristine scenery of Hinamizawa spread out before me. The village itself would have been quite beautiful if it weren't for the complicated circumstances surrounding it at the moment. I would absolutely love to take Yukie here for a drive one day. Come to think of it, I didn't get a chance to call her last night. I played around with the idea in my head. But in reality, this village wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I had heard everything at the prefectural headquarters. At the heart of this village, the intelligence network that the three families wielded was, due to blood ties and regional relationships, unbelievably well organized. Their nets spread not just around Hinamizawa itself, but encapsulated the entirety of the city of Shishibone as well. When I first heard that, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I didn't take it completely seriously. How could a local organization out in the boonies here have something so grandiose? Couldn't deny that. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I had ridiculed the thought. But no, not only were they really threatening the minister, but they had demonstrated they had a complete grasp on our movements, which were supposed to be top secret. They were almost like the secret police that controlled a small Eastern European country that will remain unnamed in some spy novel. Or ice. The villagers here wouldn't bat an eye at getting their hands dirty if it meant fighting the damn project. I'd also heard something like that at the prefectural headquarters. Now that you mention it. When I first arrived here, Oishi also said this place was a war zone, didn't he? The residents of this village were at the same time freedom fighters, although by definition they were no different than guerrillas or a militia. They weren't protected by the Geneva Convention, but they also didn't have to adhere to those rules either. This place was more of a quagmire than any legitimate battlefield. A secret war was unfolding. I could drive I could drive along because Oishi was with me. If I was to leave the car for even something as trivial as looking for a vending machine, there was a chance I wouldn't return. Even though a single shot hadn't been fired, this was a battlefield. No. The reason why bullets weren't flying was simply because it was hard for a civilian to obtain a gun in Japan. Now making a doohickey, though they were probably just equipped with weapons other than guns that were easier to obtain. That was why Oishi was wearing the stab-proof vest, wasn't it? Does a stab-proof vest also prevent bullets? I don't know. It should, right? Because the whole idea is to stop a very quick kinetic energy, right?
赤坂さん、緊張してます。
A penetrating and quick kinetic energy, you just need to stop it so they can't burrow, right? The fact that I was apprehensive was, of course, picked up on by Oishi. If he had figured it out, there was no point in trying to deny or hide
も
it.
ちろんです。敵の本拠地にたった2人で乗り込んでいるんですよ。この人数では万一の時が不安です。
万一の時な大丈夫ですよ。
この村の人間すべてが敵ではありませんでしたか。全員が口裏を合わせればこの村で白昼堂々殺人が起こっても証拠一つ残らない、そういうところだと聞いていますよ。
This was what the ironclad rule of not barging into a Yakuza office alone was about. If there wasn't a neutral party involved, that area wasn't bound by the laws of common sense. If something happened, you wouldn't be able to prove it, and there wasn't anybody who would take your side. It was pretty much the definition of poking the bear.
南沢地区へ向かうと同僚に言い残してますしね。万一の時は無線機もありますし、赤坂さんが怖がってるほどね。そう簡単には完全犯罪はできませんよ。
Oh my god, that line after the last chapter is killing me.
まあ、もちろん油断をしないに越したことはありませんがね。赤坂さん、緊張しすぎですよ。前にご一緒してた時の方がリラックスしてらしたじゃないですか。な
Laughing it off, Oishi thumped his chest and grinned, as if to say I could depend on him.
まあ、本当の本当にヤバくなったら桜の大門にはこいつがありますからね。
Oh, gun! Oishi made a motion by sticking out his index finger. It was undoubtedly the image of a gun. Let's go!
役に立ちますか？
撃った後の後始末云々が怖くなければ、実に心強いですよ。
Can you imagine every gunshot requiring paperwork after, thus making it used only for the most dire of circumstances? That is such a crazy idea. I couldn't believe it. That would be so crazy. Next, you're going to tell me that body cameras are also important. What the heck? What the heck? What the heck? An officer's gun was only for show. God, I wish that was the case. You really wanted to fire? Oh my god. Oh my god. You really wanted to fire it? There were quite a number of stipulations, and you had to be prepared for the long probationary period afterwards. That's insane, and explains a lot. That definitely wasn't worth it. So even if an officer did unholster his gun, there wasn't one who actually wanted to pull the trigger.
赤坂さんは持ってるんですか？これ。
まあ、一応。
撃ったことは？
ありますよ。訓練で。
I was gonna
ですか
say,
ね。
beyond training.
そりゃそうでしょうな。
なら大石さんにはあるんですか？
私ですか？ね。まさか。あるわけないじゃないですか。
What was this? Thought he was laughing at me because he had experience. Two of us laughed together.
銃口を向けたこともありませんがね。銃口を向けられたことなら何度かありますよ。銃口を覗かされるだけで寿命が3年は縮むな。
Even if he had never fired a gun before, you couldn't even begin to compare the amount of experience Oishi had over me. At a time like this, I could only marvel again at how reliable Oishi seemed.
そういえば日の高いうちにこっちには来たくなかったな。でも車道はここを抜ける以外にないし。
Why? For the first part.
赤坂さん、念のためもう一回マスクで顔を隠してください。
どうしたんです？
冷房がうるさいから聞こえないかな？切りますよ。窓を開けてみてください。
When I opened the window, a blast of hot air blew inside, and then I could hear angry yelling coming from far away. At that moment, the forest gave way on either side of us, and our view expanded suddenly. And there could be seen the Hinamizawa Dam construction grounds, the very front line for Hinamizawa Village. The crackling blare of someone's voice sounded over an enormous loudspeaker. The roar of angry voices continued to rumble. The incredible volume had become a veritable sound cannon spewing out its ammunition. The prefabricated site office was surrounded by two sets of high fences laced with barbed wire. Lined up in front of those fences were riot police and their vehicles. And surrounding it all were the villagers. They howled out their protests against the dam as a single entity.
今日は少ないですね。ついてます。
少ないんですか？
ええ、多い時だと道路までいっぱいになりますよ。
That's crazy.
うちうち車も通れません。
At first, due to their overwhelming intensity, it looked to me like there was more. Whoa! There was more people than there actually was, but upon closer inspection, there were at least 50 to 70 of them. But the 6 or 7 propaganda trucks lined up that looked like they belonged to a band of thugs were a strange enough sight. The villagers were also wearing helmets and bandanas, as well as covering their faces with masks, adding to the oddity of it all. The propaganda trucks, after braying their chorus, had their volume turned up even higher and began to flood the area with sutras. To say the noise was downright violent wouldn't be an understatement. From this distance, it was still this loud. The glass in the office was probably rattling from the
あれ
noise.
をガンガンやられるとたまんないんですよね。
That's insane legal protest, huh?
昨日の連中全員耳栓してて、それでも
Oh
耳が
my
おかしくなるそうです。
What a crazy way of fighting back. Oh, wait, weren't people actually doing this to the ice hotel people? Oh my god, yeah, right? Wasn't there like people down in the where the ice officers were like playing drums and renting rooms nearby and being loud. Oh my god, I've never considered how crazy that would be.
気の毒な話です。
騒音規制でなんとかできないんですか？
うちの県には騒音規制に関する規定ね。
It's like the only
ないんですよ。
time I'm like, damn, that's kind of a good thing.
それにほら、お経でしょ。
Freedom of religion?
宗教活動規制できないし。
Oh my god. That's insane.
連中も頭いいんです。
That's so smart. Whoa. I thought it was just like sutras to describe it as like that's the style. I didn't know they were actually doing sutras. Is what I think Oishi said. Actually, no matter how tightly the window was shut, the booming sound of the sutras still filled the car. I couldn't even hear what Oishi, who was sitting right next to me, was saying. As the car approached the line of propaganda trucks, the blare became difficult to bear. It wasn't enough to just plug my ears with my fingers. I had to hold my head to keep my skull from splitting apart. If I had seen this terrifying energy sooner, I would have probably understood what Hinamizawa village was much quicker. Now I knew. They wouldn't blink an eye at sacrificing themselves in order to protect their hometown, because yeah, they're listening to it. Ah, so goddamn noisy. Shut up, shut up, shut up! My head throbbed and felt like it was going to split apart. My eardrums crackled, and on top of it all, I felt like I was going to throw up. With the road crowded with throngs of squatters, the propaganda trucks, and the riot police's vehicles, there was no easy way to get by. Even if you tried to shoo the squatters with the car horn. They were also wearing earplugs, oblivious to noises from the outside world, and wouldn't easily move. The car could only inch forward at a snail's pace. Even then, the car eventually got through, starting to leave the tumultuous noise behind.
ほら、昨日一緒に麻雀やったメンツにお年寄りさんいたでしょ。覚えてます？
I remember that there was an older person who didn't exactly mince words. A guy that Oishi called Old
いら
Man.
っしゃいましたね。
彼ね、第一航空の現場監督さんなんですよ。あそこのプレハブの中でイライラしながら仕事をなさってるんでしょうね。お気の毒なことです。
あれが毎日ではたまったものではないでしょう。
耐えかねて辞めちゃう人が後を絶ちません。まあ、その度にお給金がアップしてるんで、なんとも言えませんが。
Some people will put up with anything for the money if it's high enough, you know? Like $20 is $20, but $20,000 is $20,000, you know? Even after having to deal with all the noise and hostility, they still made a wage that Oishi found enviable. Boy, you're all about that money, huh?
しょー、こいつら。聞こえてるのか聞こえてないのか。
A group of squatters were in the way of the car. Oishi, sufficiently annoyed, laid into the horn. There's no indication they were moving anytime soon. In this din, could they not even hear a car horn? Or did they hear it and were being malicious? If there were any riot police nearby, they would have made the people move, but it just so happened there weren't any around here.
もう、ちょいと待っててください。
Oh my god. Oishi opened the door. The hot air and even more heated roar of the crowd spilled into the car. Oishi said something as he grinned widely. I couldn't hear what it was. He was getting them to move. Something like that? Oishi stepped out of the car and closed the door. The din faded slightly. I stared blankly as Oishi headed towards the group and started some sort of conversation. Maybe we'd find the minister's grandson at Takatsudo. At the very least, I wanted to find him there. Find him and slip the cursed bonds of this incomprehensible village. I could only pray. At that moment, a shadow was suddenly cast over me. Somebody was standing right outside the passenger side window, blocking the sunlight. I spun around, looked up, and realized who the backlit figure was. Oh. Why are you here? What does she look like in the other sprite here? I want to take a look. See, that's not the same energy. That's also not the same energy at all. These are three incredibly different energies. It was a girl. It was Rika Furude. The girl stared down at me with a bored look in her eyes. I didn't have any justification for it. I felt like I had been found out by somebody I shouldn't. I had been found by somebody I shouldn't be found by. To fill the silence, I raised my hand as I mouthed a meek greeting. Of course, there was no way she heard my small voice in this clamor. But even then, she should have seen me wave my hand in the greeting. In spite of that, she simply stared down at me with a cold look on her face. That's scary. At that moment, the noise and heat spread through the car once again. Oishi had returned to the driver's side seat. Taking a look, the group that were blocking the road had started to move aside while glaring our
お
way.
待たせしました。行きましょうか。ん
Oishi registered the figure of the girl behind me. One of the villagers came over and picked her up. In a manner of "it's dangerous, so get away." It was then she whispered one or two words. However, I couldn't hear any of it.
さて、行きましょうかね。飛ばしますよ。
Choice of words, buddy.
もちろん、法定速度遵守で。
As if to shake off the still audible angry voices, Oishi floored the gas. Along with the roar and the din and the shouting, the villagers and the girl quickly disappeared behind
この
us.
先を抜けると高津戸地区です。銃撃戦の覚悟は大丈夫ですか
Oh my god, we're really going there, huh?
安全装置外すの土壇場でとちらないでくださいよ。
God, right?
うん。
Oishi laughed mockingly again. I was more concerned with what the girl had said, however, and I was vaguely bothered by it. What was she trying to say with that apathetic and candid expression?
今から緊張したって仕方ないですよ。むしろ収穫がなくて勇み足って可能性だって十分にあるんですから。
There was no longer a way to confirm what the girl had tried to tell me. It might have been that the girl who warned me to go back to Tokyo. It might have been that the girl who warned me to go back to Tokyo again, or else, was saying to me who was here now, and ignoring that warning.
警告したのにバカなやつ。
That is the same voice, by the way, which, yeah. Himiko from FGO. Same voice, apparently. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I had a feeling that she said something like that. Dude, this chapter is so good. Ah, some tea. Okay, we're out by the... Isn't this the Sonozaki residence? If you were to call Hinamizawa a rather lonely village, then Takatsudo was outright desolate. For your everyday city boy like me, I just couldn't understand why anybody would force themselves to live here. There were signs that people had. They were all covered in dust or enveloped in ivy, indicating that it was all
こんな
abandoned.
ところにも人は住んでいたんですね。
まあ昔の話でしょうな。こんな偏僻なとこじゃ年寄りには辛いですし。
I would say for anybody.
若者だってもう少しまともな土地に住みたいでしょうしね。後を継ぐ者がいなきゃ最後にはこうなるってことでしょうな。
Even if I had no personal attachment to this village, seeing the disused buildings made me feel a little sentimental. It seemed that Oishi also felt the same way.
こんなところで財布が発見されたんですか。財布の取得者もよくこんなに偏僻なところに通りかかったものですね。
ああ、村人には山の中に畑を持ってる連中がいましてね。
Okay.
そういう連中は朝晩ここを通りますから。
畑仕事の村人たちは早朝や夕方にここを徒歩で通ると。
まさか。行けるところまでは車で行くでしょうな。
早朝や夕方にこんなところを走行して落ちているたった一つの財布を発見できます。
I think, you know, if you're on like a small town path and you saw a wallet, I would stop too.
できたんでしょうな。
I think it makes sense.
取得者はどこで取得したと言っていますか。
もう少し先を行ったところにある茂みです。 取得者はたまたまお腹が痛くなってちょいと茂みで用を足そうと思ったらしい。
Big
そ
shitter.
れで偶然見つけたらしいんですよ。中にちり紙でも入ってるのを期待したんですかね。
Oh my god, did he use the paper money
話
for
が
that?
できすぎているように感じます。財布発見の当初からそういう違和感が拭えません。
I expressed the feeling that I had from the start of the day, quite frankly. It seemed too good to be true, but it was unwavering proof. But it was too perfect. Sickeningly so. That was my
で
feeling.
きすぎってな、案外当たってるかもしれませんよ。
というと、
実は4課のお友達からちょいと聞いたんですがね。
Don't give that number. We're on chapter 4. Chapter 4. And you're talking about the 4th division? Somebody's gonna die.
園崎お涼が大臣の孫の誘拐事件について言及したって話なんです。
言及した？
大臣の孫ももう誘拐されてから何日にもなってかわいそうだ。そろそろ解放されるといいな。そう、お涼のばあさんが縁側でぼそりとつぶやいたってな話らしいんです。で、そのぼそりが園崎家の裏の裏のあちこちに伝えられてるようです。
Now, wait a second. Friend of mine in the 4th division. Wasn't pretty much the only person here Mion? Huh. That's very strange. Right. I'd heard something earlier from Sato-san, the informant. That was when Leader Oryu had a concern somebody in the family would be considerate.
つまり、それは実質上の人質解放命令ですか？
私はそう見てます。この出来すぎの財布発見は孫を警察に引き渡すためのイベントじゃないかと。
This was just a way to get... Did they leak the wallet themselves so we go save him?
どうして人質の解放を？
Huh.
そりゃ人質を解放するなんて理由は一つしかないじゃないですか。
なんです？
取引の成立ですよ。ひなみ沢ダム計画の中止を大臣が約束ってことですかね。
ダム計画なんて必ずなくなっちゃいますのです。
At that moment, those words that the girl had said resurfaced in the back of my mind. In the end, it was turning out exactly as she proclaimed. That young girl knew the circumstances. She knew everything about this kidnapping incident, from beginning to the end.
赤坂、
The girl unexpectedly called my name.
なんだい？
東京へ帰れ。あなたはもう幾ばくもしないうちに、それがあまりにもみすぼらしくて、今のうちから警告してあげているのです。
You will woefully regret. That would be pathetic.
どうして私が後悔することになる？
いちいちうるさいな。あなたの親は、あなたが赤信号の横断歩道の真ん中にいるとき、どうして危ないのかを全部説明し終えるま
This
で
is such a crazy
引っ張
metaphor.
るでしょ。まず歩道まで連れ戻してから、なぜ危険なのかを解くでしょう。つまりはそういうこと。
The girl, who knew everything from start to finish, had warned me in the beginning. Go back to Tokyo.
赤坂の怖がり。
Okay, I think people told me also to check this sprite. Apparently this sprite is interesting. Okay, that's not great. That's smug as hell, though. I like that one. Yeah, that's powerful. But the more I look, the more I think console is truly the best sprites. Like, I get it fully.
孫は無事見つかるでしょうが、その後はいろいろと厄介な問題になるでしょうな。どう厄介になるかは一警察官の私には想像もつきませんがね。
フルでリカって少女、ご存知ですか？
What I had said was such a non sequitur that Oishi sat in stunned silence for a while.
もちろん知ってますよ。御三家の一つ。 古出家の一人娘ですね。
どういう少女なんです？
おやおや、これは意外な人物名にちょっと驚きです。公安では古出家が臭いと睨んでおられるわけで、私にも情報を分けてくださいよ。
あ、いや、そういうのじゃないんです。ちょっと気になったもので。
まあいいや。同じ卓を囲んだ友人の質問なら答えないわけにはいきませんからね。
友人と呼んでいただけて光栄です。
で、あのお嬢ちゃんはね、
Mm-hmm.
まあ村のマスコットみたいなもんです。
We got this from before for sure.
村中の誰からも愛されてま
In
す。
fact, this sounds like the exact information we got from before.
中でも年寄り連中には特に崇められてま
Yeah,
した、
this is word for word what we got from before.
崇められる？
よくは知らないんですがね、古出家に生まれた女の子ってのには多少神聖な意味合いがあるらしいんですよ。ひなみ沢の土着信仰ですがね、お社様の生まれ変わりだとかなんとか、そんな話があるらしいですよ。
Okay, so because we know he's not only from this village, but knows about Oyashiro-sama, he's pretending to not know as much.
お社様。そういえば、同盟の登り旗の中に、お社様と書かれたものがあったような気がします。何ですか、お社様って？
ああ、ひなみ沢の守り神様の名前です。村にあだなす者に罰を当てるって信じられてましてね。まあそんな便利な神様がいたらダムの連中はとっくに神罰にやられているんでしょうが、幸い今日までその罰ってやつは一つも起こってませんがね。
Am I wrong in thinking that who was well, the first of the murders was, God, I can't even think about how many years back this is. This has to be before the killing of the foreman, right? Oh God, was it the old man who was killed? Oh, but this had to be before it, right?
村にあだなす大臣の孫が、お社様の怒りに触れ、なんて言いましたっけ？そう、鬼隠し。大臣の孫を鬼隠しにしたと。
I love this way of doing translations because he just says Onikakushi twice, but one of them they translate. I love that. I love that idea.
そういう筋書きになるわけでしょうか。
なるほどな。そういうことになるんでしょうな。
お社様が下した神罰なら、犯人はお社様の生まれ変わりであるあの少女。
Oh boy, that's kind of what I've been thinking. Even I didn't know exactly what I was saying. Or rather, even I didn't know exactly what I was saying. The fact that Oishi laughed it off was a bit of a relief. Oishi's joyous laughter was so infectious, I began to laugh like an idiot as well.
ありゃ、こりゃ珍しい。
Oishi, after laying into the horn several times, rolled the window down and leaned out, waving his arm in an exaggerated manner. It was a car headed the opposite direction. Is it Irie? Until now, we hadn't run into any other cars except our own. And of all the places, it was at this desolate location. It seemed that Oishi knew the owner of that car. The other car also chirped its horn and came to a stop.
入江の先生、
It is. Okay. Oh boy, we are close.
こんにちは。
The other car's window rolled down slowly, revealing a young man in a white overcoat. He was about my age, or perhaps a bit older. But you really can't judge someone by their appearance.
大石さんじゃありませんか。こんにちは。珍しいところでお会いしますね。
そりゃこっちのセリフですよ、先生。まさかこんなところで会うとはね。どうしたんです？
いえね、ちょっとした往診です。
I wonder if just the fact he was here will be enough to make us continue to go in. We won't have to say much
あ
else.
りゃ、そうですか。休館とかでしたか。
いえ、そんなに大したことではありませんでした。よかったですよ。
お医者の世話にならずに済むなら、それに越したことはないです。
ではこれで。 急いで戻らないとスタッフに怒られますんで。
な診療所長さんも大変です。ではでは、お気をつけて。
The young doctor named Irie, after gesturing his farewell, drove forwards and soon disappeared around a corner. Oishi also drove forwards, but soon came to a stop again. He pulled out a worn map book from the dash. His expression didn't have an ounce of irreverence. He was perfectly serious.
どうしたんです？
今日は診療所は往診の日じゃないはずです。よっぽどの急患か、特殊な事情のある患者ということになりますね。
Oishi flipped through the pages, opening up to the map of Takatsudo. After that, he took a look around and started to figure out what our current location was.
その急患が怪しいということですか？
言ったでしょう、高津戸地区にね。今私たちがいる道はここ。入江先生はこの道に対して。
Having no sense of our surroundings, I couldn't digest anything about the place he was indicating on the map.
私たちは財布の取得場所を目指しています。ちなみに取得場所はここ。でもね、高津戸地区にわずかにある民家に向かうには、そもそも道が違うんです。
つまり入江医師は民家のない方角から来たと。
山間の段々畑で農作業中に誰かが倒れたってのでない限りね、人が倒れて医者が呼ばれたら、
Yeah.
普通は連れ帰って
Oh
詳し
man.
く調べる。
Oh man. God, you're smart, actually.
でもさっき理恵医師は大したことはなかったと言いましたね。車には他には誰も乗っていなかったようですし。
Oishi didn't say anything more than that. I also said nothing more. The doctor just now examined a patient close by. Only that. The noisy radio had suddenly gone quiet. The sky had just as suddenly turned an oppressive color. As Oishi mused that it might start to rain, a torrential downpour started as though trying not to disappoint him. Eventually, Oishi stopped the car. The only sounds to break the silence were the percussion of the rain on the roof and the soft squeak of the windshield wipers.
ちょいと静か静かで行きましょうかね。
Saying that in a quiet voice, he exited the car without an umbrella, careful not to make any noise. Oishi leaned over, indicating the other side of the thicket. He was pointing to a prefabricated shed. Oh my god, are we here? And a car that was parked beside it. The car looked obviously well cared for. It wasn't a vehicle that had been left there for several
あの
years.
小屋は？
営林署の機材小屋です。夏場以外は利用されてないと聞きました。
あの車は営林署の職員？
さあね、公用車には見えないですね。
Oishi was playing it cool. My nervousness was gradually increasing.
一応は念のため。
Saying that, Oishi returned to the car. I thought he was going to get an umbrella, but he grabbed the onboard radio instead.
もしもし、大石です。聞こえてるかな？こんにちは、こんにちは。
はい、沖宮 PS。大石さん、感度良好です。どうぞ。
That's the best quality radio I've ever heard.
今、高津戸地区の営林署機材小屋前です。矢口に向かう方じゃないよ。平見沢から高津戸に入る方の。
はい、確認しました。
小屋に不審者。これより職質します。5分で連絡なかったら駐在所に連絡と大至急応援パトを送ってください。
We're going to try to do this in 5 minutes.
よろしくお願いします。
了解しました。
じゃあ行ってみましょうか
I'm
ね。
like nervous, man. This is like a friggin' police procedural, and I'm nervous. Since he was first confined here, he heard the sound of a car multiple times. So he just thought that the far-off sound was more of the same. However, the reaction from his captors was, until now, something he hadn't seen before. They jumped, reacting as if shocked by a jolt of electricity, and pressed against the window, cautiously peering outside.
困ったな。
営林署の人間まずいぜ。
いや、警察やんな。
One of the captors lifted the boy by the collar and pressed a blade against his cheek.
お兄ちゃん、ちょい静かにしててな。分かってると思うけど、大声出したりすると大変なことになるからな。
Toshiki Inukai was sure that the doctor had reported things to the police. He had felt relief when he thought he was saved, but not imagining that his captors would resort to violence when they were cornered, his anxiety remained unabated.
どうする？
時間稼いでる。小僧連れてちょい裏から抜けな。ほとぼり冷めたら打ち合おう。
One of the perpetrators grabbed the boy by the collar and forced him to stand. Of course, Toshiki Inukai tried to resist by feigning that his illness had been aggravated by this rough treatment, but his captors paid no heed. The door was violently banged upon.
ごめんください。こんにちは。
The door was banged on again. Toshiki Inukai hesitated for a moment to respond to that voice by yelling. However, while he was being indecisive, his mouth was covered, taking that option away from him. The leader of the captors waved at the other to go. The younger perpetrator nodded in response, and while keeping the boy's mouth covered, started heading towards the back door. Please tell me we're there.
はいはい。何かご用かいね。
どうも、警察ですがね。ここちょっと開けてもらっていいですか。急な雨で困っちゃいましてね。
ええ、今開けます。
The moment the lock was undone, Oishi forced the door open, and with a gleam of menace in his eyes, he pushed the man aside as he stepped into the room. And in the small and empty room, he was able to quickly discern the boy he was looking for was nowhere to be seen.
あれ？私はここは営林署の機材倉庫だって聞いてたんですけどね。何にもありませんね。
There was nothing inside the room that would indicate this was an equipment shed. There was only a mountain of blankets, indicating somebody was sleeping here, alongside empty food packets strewn about.
ああ。ここはずいぶん前から空っぽさね。機材がしまってあるところなんて。
でも営林署の建物でしょ。あんた営林署の人。
あんたこそ誰よ。警察？
Two of them glared at each other suspiciously. Both Oishi and the man steadfastly refused to reveal their identity before the other did. The man, judging by the sharp look in Oishi's eyes, realized it'd be hard to talk his way out of this one. No matter what he said, the most he could do was buy time. The most time he could buy would probably be only a few dozen seconds. Only the sound of rain filled this tense moment. Oh! I was gonna say, because there was no telling that we were there. Just then they heard the sound of a struggle from far off. Oishi had a hunch. There was no doubt that Akasaka, who was circling back around, had run into the perpetrators who were trying to slip away. As Oishi thought that, the man in front of him reacted a moment faster. The man swung with an attack that was intended to obscure Oishi's vision rather than actually hit him in the face. Seizing his opportunity, the man aimed a kick at Oishi's groin without any hesitation. But he missed his mark and was unable to land that critical blow. The man, trying to pin Oishi, grabbed him by the base of his neck with both hands and fiercely tried to push him down. As Oishi fell backwards, as if kicking the man upward, he dug his foot into the man's midsection. With that leg acting as a fulcrum, the man was flung by the falling Oishi as if by a circle throw. The two of them squared off in the pouring rain.
面白いじゃないの。俺とやろうってか。
Yo, he's so ready to throw hands. Again, my man has command grabs. Oishi, as if trying to cheer himself on, grinned smugly. He then stood up while brushing the mud off himself. Even though he countered the assault, Oishi was getting up rather awkwardly compared to the man who he threw, who swiftly sprang to his feet. Akasaka's voice rang out from the distance. Judging from the distress in his voice, he was already engaged in a fight and wanted Oishi to reconvene with him. But Oishi's hands were full as well. The man raised both fists in a stance that hinted at him being acquainted with karate or some other form of martial art. Of course, Oishi, an officer of the law, was decently versed in judo. He also had the moxie to have been through his fair share of fights before. Because of that, you could tell that the man in front of him was quite a bit better at fighting than he was. Ah, damn it. Thinking that this was going to be easy just because the order came from the Sonozaki family to release a hostage had been a big mistake.
なかなか上等じゃないのよ。久々に胃液がこみ上げてくる感じがしますよ。
Oishi played off the situation like it was no sweat. His opponent, seeing his attitude, took that to mean that Oishi wasn't going to go down easily. The man wildly charged forward, attempting to grab Oishi. The man managed a successful clinch from this low stance. Oishi would be tackled to the ground and end up being mounted. It was something you often saw when children fought. It was a really bad position, since you couldn't do much once you were in it. Oishi, responding to that move, also lowered his stance to collide with the man head-on. The moment they clashed, Oishi grabbed the man's lapel. As he yanked the lapel upwards, he smashed in the man's solar plexus with the elbow of the same arm. It was a move from Oishi's own personal brand of brawling judo. He then grabbed on with his free hand and attempted to throw his opponent with both hands. The man lowered his center of gravity and swung his arms in a large arc, entwining them with Oishi's. Not only that, but he had forced both of Oishi's elbows to the outside, and Oishi, now in an awkward position, was in danger of exposing his back with his hands still clutching the man's chest. This guy practiced Aikido or grappling, didn't he? Oishi, cursing the fact that his fingers were twisted into the man's shirt and couldn't get away, released his grip. He was still in an awkward position of being bent over. And to top it off at zero range, the man was able to read Oishi's movements completely as he tried to squirm his way into a better position. And then took the palms of his hands and swiftly clapped both of them over Oishi's ears. Oh, that's the worst. Yeah, that's just sheer pain. Clapping the ears that's a forbidden. Yeah, clapping the ears in any other martial art, except for self-defense, was basically forbidden. Karate and judo didn't recognize it as a legal technique. It was that much of a simple and dangerous attack. It's really dangerous. Oishi raised both his hands as he tried to reflectively clutch at his own ears. But before that could happen, the man wrapped his arms around Oishi's neck. His thick biceps clenched firmly around the base of Oishi's... I keep saying Oishi. Oishi's neck like a vice. Oh, Oishi instinctively thought he was going to be killed. After all, it wasn't hard to believe that a man like this, who was accustomed to fighting, could crush his opponent's neck from this position. But his opponent didn't do that. He chose to keep his hold and force Oishi to lose consciousness. That's why Oishi, at that moment, even though his face was twitching, was grinning widely. Even though his opponents had a chance to kill him, he didn't choose to. He was thinking, this guy has no intention of killing me. However, even though that might be the case, the man's hold on his neck was by no means gentle. In no time at all, Oishi's consciousness began to fade. Having the experience of being taken down countless times in judo during his student days, Oishi was utterly resigned to the fact that it was over. Damn, did it get one on him? Akasaka was finally recovering from the intense pain of being kicked in a rather sensitive area. He had bumped into the captor carrying the boy by the back entrance. He had seen Toshiki Inukai's picture plenty of times, and he wasn't able to immediately ascertain if the boy in front of him was the real deal, with his mouth covered in packing tape. Also, with his limited experience, it wasn't hard for him to panic over how to deal with the situation. Of course, the perpetrator didn't overlook this momentary lapse. His kick landed squarely in a critical spot, with Akasaka not even have time to call for help. As the man flung the boy over his shoulder, he headed towards the front of the shed. But upon hearing Oishi's bellowing voice, he gave up going on that direction. He then dashed off toward the forest, as if the weight of the boy slung over his shoulder wasn't even there. Akasaka was lost for a moment. Meeting up with Oishi, who was fighting with the enemy, was by far the safer option. He couldn't just lose sight of the fleeing man. Akasaka stood up and chased after the captor's back. He ran through a short thicket, branches and fallen leaves crunching underfoot. Tips of branches raked and clawed at him, and small scratches inscribed themselves on his body one after another. He kept on stepping into puddles and mud, and his shoes were soon filled with murky water. For Akasaka, traveling through this unexpected forest was, even though this was an emergency situation, extremely unpleasant. Honestly, mud in the shoes is the worst ever. As he said that, he regretted it immediately, as it was but a waste of breath. There wasn't a thief in the world that would politely stop when told to by the police. To a city boy like Akasaka, running through this forest was an arduous task. However, it must have been no easy task either for the man carrying the minister's grandson. He neither gained nor lost ground in his pursuit. Akasaka, upon realizing that, gained back a bit of composure. Just keep on chasing him. We are running in the same conditions. In fact, the man was running with an awkward stride was at far more at a disadvantage. They couldn't run forever. Eventually, he'd definitely trip and fall. As long as he was being hounded, he would definitely stumble. And soon his wish was fulfilled. The man who had stepped into something and lost his balance, and was no longer able to bear the weight of the boy, dropping him. Akasaka, in all honesty, didn't care about the perp at all, just as long as he could ensure the safety of Toshiki Inukai. So the perpetrator ran off by himself, it was perfectly acceptable. It seemed that Toshiki Inukai was important to the man as well, and didn't choose to run away empty-handed. Akasaka didn't know what to do in this kind of situation. His first priority should probably be to ensure the safety of the boy, subduing his captor being less important. Grappling with the perpetrator wasn't something he planned on. Most likely, it was either do or die. Akasaka's moment of indecision proved to be fatal. The man aiming right between, or rather, for both of Akasaka's eyes, struck out with a jab. Not wanting that, Akasaka raised both his hands to shield his face. At that moment, the man kicked his unguarded midsection. Pain almost felt like his vital organs were being squeezed out of his body, but he latched onto his opponent's leg. But if his opponent didn't hesitate one bit, leading with his seized foot, the man jumped at Akasaka, applying pressure and pushing him down. Akasaka was unable to withstand that and fell, but under no circumstances was he letting that leg go. The two men fell together in a tangled heap. The man was desperate to pull his leg free from Akasaka, but having fallen to an awkward position was unable to do so. The two of them rolled around on the ground, floundering about trying to gain an advantage. But Akasaka, who was holding onto his opponent's knee with both hands, and that opponent who had complete freedom to move his upper body, were in two completely different situations. The man gained a positional advantage on Akasaka, who still latched onto his leg and couldn't move away, and pounded full force on his head with both fists. Not only that, oh no! He found a nearby rock and beat it against Akasaka's skull. That's bad. The difference between being hit with a fist and being hit with a rock was vast. Akasaka quickly thought of letting go of the man's leg to free his hands to protect his head. If he let go here, the man would get away. If he didn't dig in here, everything would be for naught. The boy he was trying to save was right there. He was going to save him and go back to Tokyo. If he could do that, then it was goodbye to this freakish village. Without looking, I could tell my forehead would split open and was gushing blood. But I didn't let go of the man's leg. How could I? I won't let go! The man realized that no matter how much he beat me, he wasn't getting away. He used both his hands to grab my throat as if to crush my windpipe. I pulled my head back as a slight form of resistance, but it was of no use. The man's hands enveloped my neck, began to crush it like a vice. It was less about the pain of not being able to breathe, as much as it was choking so hard I was about to throw up. It felt like my stomach was going to turn itself inside out. But I could only endure it. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it! My throat hurts. Won't let go. I can't let go. I didn't want to be here. I wanted to resolve this and go back to Tokyo. Go back to Tokyo and talk to Yukie all about her unborn child. We were going to talk about our bright future. I had no intention of loosening my grip. However, it loosened just a bit, and the man's leg came free. The man kicked as hard as possible, and I tumbled backwards. My head was spinning, and I was unable to get up right away. No, I couldn't even put any strength into getting up in the first place. Even so, I couldn't back down. If I let him escape now, this chance would never come again. Even just catching their scents was nothing short of a miracle. If we weren't able to get the minister's grandson back here, there wouldn't be any other chance. The man tried to drag the boy to his feet. The kid was displaying some unexpected resistance, allowing me to get up unnoticed. I grasped the rock the man had just beat me over the head with. Now it's my turn. The rock should have been able to supplement what meager strength I had left, adding more than enough power to my attack. My fist still wrapped around the rock, dug into the side of the man's torso. It seemed like it hurt him quite a bit. The man rolled around for a bit, clutching his side. Freed from the man's grip, the boy hid behind me. The boy, those were the words he was waiting for the most. But the crisis was still not over. That was because even though he was clutching at his side, the man had gotten up and had taken a fighting stance. This is where you take out the gun! I could see in the man's eyes the resentment at the pain I had caused him, and the confidence that he could still beat me. If we were to clash head to head, He might even stop me if my head were split open.
これ以上抵抗するな。おとなしく降参しろ。
てめえこそ小僧をこっちへよこすんな。首の骨をへし折られていか。
誰が貴様の言いなりになどなるものか。もうじき応援が到着する。
That's true, actually.
貴様らに逃げ場などない。
The man reacted adversely to the word reinforcements. That was because he knew that arguing like this wasn't just a waste of time, putting him closer and closer to danger. Realizing that, the man shifted mental gears almost too quickly.
なら手っ取り早く済ませるぜ。こいつならどうだよ。
But the man pulled out from his back pocket. Oh no! I said for a gun, but I didn't know you. What the man pulled from his back pockets was, of all things, a gun. Of course, I'm a police officer. It's not like I don't know what a gun is. But having one pointed at me was something I'd never experienced before. Was it real? Well, of course it was. There's no way to be a replica in a situation like
おとなし
this.
く両手を頭の上で組んで、そこにうつ伏せになるんだよ。
ついに乗るな悪党。誰がお前に従うか。
クソバカが。撃たれなきゃこいつの恐ろしさがわからねえかよ。
なら撃ってみろ。貴様の忠誠で。応援がここに駆けつけるぞ。
バカが。森の中で。しかもこの雨だぞ。銃声などかき消える。
As long as he still held that gun, no matter how much I yelled at him, I was at a distinct disadvantage. But I still had a fighting chance. If I were in his shoes, instead of wasting time yelling at each other like this, I would just shoot him and take the boy. That way, oh my god, what if he shoots him while we're doing this thinking? That way was the fastest and would suppress any sort of further resistance from him. The man was demanding my surrender without having fired a shot. Meaning that either he didn't want to shoot or he couldn't. Maybe he's a new newbie with the gun himself. In other words, the man in front of me was soft. If I could buy even just a little bit more time, the factors that would lead to my victory were numerous. Oishi was probably on his way, and the reinforcements we called for before coming here should already be on their way too. Not only that, they should have contacted the local police box. Without a doubt, somebody stationed in the village would be here much quicker than that.
クソ誰が。撃たれなきゃこいつの怖さがわからねえかよ。
どうせ逃げられやしない。無駄に罪を重ねるな。
At that moment, I heard the rustling of foliage and heavy footsteps approaching. If Oishi was coming here, it was a whole new ball game. The man couldn't have more than one gun. Oh my god, then he starts dual wielding.
おいさん、ここです。ここです。
Oh no. I thought that time was on my side, but I failed to imagine that the enemy could also have reinforcements. You could tell the man who had just appeared was one of the perpetrators just by looking at him.
何しよってんだ。はよせんとな。警官来るんで。なん油うっとんしゃん。
くそ。おいさんはどうしたってんだ。
ああ。あんの樽男かよ。落としたったら泡吹いとんよ。
おいさんがくそ。
The boy, sensitive to the impending danger, curled up behind my back. How could this be? Damn
期
it!
待してた相方は来ないってよ。ざまあねえぞ。観念するのはてめえの方だ。
As I backed up against a large tree while still protecting the boy, the second man also pulled out a
2
gun.
回しか言わんね。
Oh god.
頭抱えてそこにうつ伏せになるんよ。
Oh god.
断る。
Oh no. As I shouted in protest, blood erupted from my shoulder. It took a few moments to register that I had been shot. Compared to the ones in movies and TV dramas, the first actual gunshot I heard was simple and mundane. In fact, the sound was more akin to the small fireworks I used to buy from the corner store as a kid. There was no comparing the pain. It was a fear you knew only after you'd been shot.
おじさん、大丈夫？大丈夫？
The boy in his confusion tugged at my clothes, agitating the wound even further. I wanted to put on a bold face and reassure him, but my voice was hoarse and had the opposite effect.
大丈夫。すでに応援は要請してあるんだ。すぐに警官隊が駆けつけてくれる。
警官が来る前に、お前ん額にもっぱつくれちゃる方が早いんだ。無駄な殺生すなっちゅう、本家に言われとんか加減しとん。あんまりなめとんと、容赦せんとよ。
This was bad. It was very, very bad. The second man was a completely different beast than the first. He had no signs of indecisiveness or mercy. If this man said he'd shoot, he'd shoot. He wasn't somebody that a man like me could buy time from. I really hated to admit it. At that moment, the image of Yukie's smiling face crossed the back of my mind. I knew what that meant. I was warning myself not to throw my life away over a matter of pride. Of course I didn't want to die here. I was just starting a new life with Yukie, and I wanted to see the face of our soon-to-be-born child. Why should I risk my life for some minister's grandson when I was just at such a critical juncture of my own life? Ah, damn it. Damn it. I need to stop rambling at myself. So what do I do now? Love the boy and extend my own life? What a good idea. Everybody's life is precious. My own life is in danger. Nobody would blame me. Oh, God damn it. It hurts. It hurts. If I had known it'd be this painful, I wouldn't have played the tough guy. My biggest miscalculation, though, was that the sound of the gunshot was far quieter than I had imagined. If it was only that loud, it would have been drowned out by the rain in the forest. It wasn't something that somebody far away could hear. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. We have a choice. I'm gonna try pleading for my life. This looks like a bad end. You know what? I kind of want to see both endings. So you know what? Let's go. Let's put it on. Let's see. Will it work if I go to the highlight good? I'm just curious. What does it look like? Let's go. Quick save, quick load. Oh, Plead for My Life is the good one. Are you serious? Okay, no, this is a good one because that sounds like the bad one. Okay, well let's freaking die, gamers. Okay, so I'm gonna turn that off because I thought that'd be, I don't know, I didn't know how that would work there. Let's go normal. Okay, let's watch for an opportunity. Shit. Can't afford to die in a place like this. I need to survive and return to Yukie's side. For a moment, I catch a glimmer of hesitation in the eyes of the man holding the gun. This guy's unsure about shooting me? If so, maybe if I... Oh, this is such a bad choice. That was not what we said. Maybe if I jump at him now, I could... Oh yeah, no wonder we die. Yeah, like... Okay, that was... I guess wait for an opportunity. That actually was kind of what it was, huh? In a flash, everything before me grows dark as my consciousness leaves me behind. It was only after my body temperature rapidly came down and a burning sensation in my chest turned numb that I realized I had been shot. I was just curious what that would look like to get a bad end. So, yeah. And what does it do? It is a title screen one. Okay. Okay. I was just really curious. There's no Chivo for it, which is, I guess, makes sense. I don't think it was in the normal PC port, right? Anyways, Bleed for My Life.
こっちだって死なせとうない。わかればええんわかれば。
As long as you understand, this writing is insane.
撃つなよ。帰りを待ってる妻がいるんだ。死にたくないんだよ。
叫ばんとでも歌んね。おとなしい頭抱えてうつ伏せになったら歌んだるね。
本当だろうな。本当だろうな。約束は守れよ。絶対だぞ。男と男の約束だぞ。
守ったんだ。男と男の約束しやよ。
守れよ。守れよ。じゃあうつ伏せになるからな。なるからな。約束守るんだから。銃を向けるのやめろよ。やっぱ撃つ気なんだろ。撃つ気なんだろ。
Oh, he's freaking out.
撃つついになったら後頭部を撃つ気なんだろ。
歌んね歌んね。わーった。しまってる。銃はしまってる。男と男の約束しやね。
Oh my god, are we gonna diddle him by then taking out our own gun?
これなら文句ないんて。
Oh, even better. Did he just do a raging demon? It was over in a flash. The moment he lowered his gun, Oishi didn't let his chance slip by. Oishi had been assessing the situation for some time from behind the two men. But since they had their guns trained on me, he didn't really have a chance to jump in. Seeing the look on Oishi's face indicating that he wanted an opening would have been real nice to know. I took on that role completely. Oishi forcefully lifted the arm that was holding the gun. He then took the gun from the man's hand in only an instant. The other man, who was a bit slow in grasping what was going on, pointed his gun at them. With his ally grappling with Oishi, he couldn't pull the trigger. If that man was the one wrestling with Oishi at the moment, he might have shot without hesitation. But this man wouldn't shoot. He couldn't shoot. Oishi kicked the other man away while aiming the stolen gun with his left hand, pulling out his own. I made the joke about dual wielding. With guns akimbo, he was aiming at both men at the same time. Holy shit, Oishi. Shut up. You might as well have said jackpot. It was perfectly played. But heedless of the guns pointed at them, the men shouted scram as they scattered away at full speed. It was over in an instant. Oh my god. The two running away without putting up a fight was honestly unexpected. Oishi quietly clicking his tongue in admonition. Admonishment, that's the word. I like how he read all that really well and then this word to get cut up on. Slipped both guns into his pant pockets. That's not safe, but okay.
あいつらもよく知ってるな。
何をですか？
逃げてる背中を警官は撃てませんからね。
Oh, is that real?
私も退職金が惜しいもんで。
Oh god, fair. Oishi and I grinned at each other.
君が犬飼俊樹君？犬飼検察大臣のお孫さん？
はい。
これはでかい事件になるかな。どうせトカゲの尻尾切りになるんでしょうけどね。
Oishi smiled amusedly. The fact that the Onigufuchi Guardians, or rather the Sonozaki family behind them, was pulling the strings was apparent, but proving it wouldn't be easy. And with apologies to Oishi, this incident was unlikely to go public. If this caused an uproar, it would lead to the minister losing his office. With HQ having decided that doing so was in the national interest, this would probably be cleaned up quietly. It might be a rough way of saying it, but this was born in the shadows and was going to die in the shadows. Oishi had probably understood the implications behind this incident.
とにかく非常線を張らせましょう。連中まだ一丁は拳銃を持ってるようですからね。それから犬飼君を保護して赤坂さんはすぐに病院に行かないと。
As the tension in the situation faded, the pain from the gunshot wound in my shoulder blossomed once again. My forehead was also stinging painfully, and had grown hot enough to start a fire. Thinking that the tension caused me to sweat, I wiped my forehead, but what came off was a large amount of blood. I realized that my shirt had been stained bright crimson from the blood flowing from my head. I turned around. The boy was safe and sound, without a doubt. There would probably be an investigation on the men who ran, but that was for another day. At this point in time, I could safely say we cleared the major hurdle of securing the boy's safety. As soon as I recognized that, I felt like the lights in my head had been hit by a power failure. My knees buckled from underneath me, the ground there feeling as soft as a cloud. It didn't feel unpleasant even as I was covered in the rain-soaked mud. Oishi came closer, asking if I was okay, but somehow I couldn't tell. I turned off the switch to the last light in my head. The exhaustion enveloped me. Sleep. Something softer than any blanket wrapped around me. I'm sorry, my first thought was that it was Oishi. Just like, I'll warm you up. Noo-foo-foo. End of chapter. End of chapter. Holy crap. Holy crap. Yeah. Wow. Damn. Only one, a very kind person. Good, because this was long already and was already kind of jumping perspectives. Mission accomplished. Made a daring rescue. But then who was phone? A very kind person. Let's see here. Patients admitted to the hospital can only accept calls at fixed times. That's why she wouldn't be receiving a call from him today. Oh. Yesterday she had teased him that he got lonely easily. Oh, this is the wife. So he might have struggled with the idea of calling her sooner. It was much easier to imagine rather than that he might just be too busy to call. Because he's just that type of person. Yukie, whispering that, smiled to herself. The announcement that visiting hours were over played over the hospital intercom along with some music. She exchanged pleasantries with the family of the patient that was staying in the same room as her. Probably eager for his mother to be discharged, there was a young child wearing a beaming smile. Their young child was wearing a beaming smile. The child's mother was pregnant in the bed next to mine with what may be their new brother or sister. They're probably ready to burst with the expectations, dreams, and worries of having a new sibling. The joys of a growing family. Bathing in those warm feelings, I stroked my own belly, which had grown quite large. I had talked with him about how many children we wanted to have. We talked about how if we had 3, it would certainly be lively. However, there was the inescapable worry of whether I would be able to handle giving birth that many
でも
times.
そんなことを不安に思って出産を嫌う母なんていないですものね。
Nikie, smiling as she said that to herself, gently stroked her stomach. Metropolitan Safety Division, the place where that man's sense of justice had led him. That person was actually a very gentle, very fragile person. He didn't talk much about the specifics, but I didn't think he was suited for the assignment he was on right now. As long as he was going to try his best, I would watch over him
あなた
warmly.
のお父さんはね、とっても頑張り屋さんなのよ。くちょこちょこちょこちょ。
This is going to make me cry. Yukie seemed to be enjoying herself as she talked to her own belly. At that moment, Yukie suddenly became concerned about something and looked out the window. It used to be this time, long ago. She remembered that when she was little, around the time... Wait. Are you an expat from Inamizawa? She remembered that when she was little, around this time in the countryside where her grandmother lived, the Higurashi would fill the air with their chorus. There's no way. This was the middle of Tokyo. Unlike in the countryside, you couldn't hear the song of the Higurashi. But for some reason, at that moment, Yukie felt that she wanted to hear that song. Huh. That's really curious. That's really curious. I don't know if that's going to mean anything. It might not even actually be. It just might be more thematic than anything, but it's still very interesting. All right, guys, we're on to chapter 5 next time. Probably a lot less action-packed, but I'm real curious what the hell could come after this. I don't know how many chapters there are. I don't know if there's 1 more or 2 more, but either way, we'll see what comes up next time. So thank you all for watching, guys, and we will see you then for some more Higurashi Chapter 4. Ciao.